the nourishment of each other, and they pray that they get energized together, and there should not be any animosity between them. And the three times Shanti word is for Purush, that is man, nature, and the divine forces. This is the glory and the beauty of our traditional Indian system of education. Let me introduce our speaker of the day, Ma'am Shukla Purani Ma'am. Ma'am is the head of department at our sister concern, that is Srimati LNC Mehta Arts College in the adjoining building. Ma'am has a teaching experience of more than 30 years, teaching both at UG and PG level. Ma'am has presented papers in various national and international conferences. She has also contributed articles in various published books. Ma'am has to his credit, she has a book co-edited by her on marginalized literature, as well as she is a regular contributor and content writer on the GUETA website, as well as on the Ambedkar University also. I welcome ma'am for this lecture. Without flowers, our tradition is incomplete. So I request Rashmi ma'am, please, to welcome ma'am with this bouquet. Students, Mahakumbh, Prayagraj and Holy are trending in social media and everywhere. So let me tell you, there is another Kumbh called Srihasta Kumbh, which is organized after every 12 years at Ujjaini city on the banks of holy river Shipra. Man bears the same name, and the holy leaf reads you of all the sins. And for a student, ignorance is the biggest thing. So today's lecture of man will give you an opportunity to dive deep, to take a holy dip in the river of knowledge, right? So I'm excited to welcome man. Man, what's his job?
Good morning, one and all. Good morning, I'm extremely delighted to be here in your presence. I have been given a very challenging task to discuss postmodern literary theories, which is always a challenge not only for students but for teachers also. But I hope that together, today, we are able to make some sense out of these postmodern literary theories.
Now, today's talk is a part of your syllabus. You know it, part of your essay paper. But why I have stood up again to speak is that just to remind you that criticism is a part of way of life. So don't take this topic just, and that's what our ma'am is also going to focus and emphasize when she wants the lecture. This is not just the syllabus topic. Just don't think कि तो बच्चे हम पढ़कर आए हैं, हमको तो पता नहीं, तैयार करके तो आए, assignment तो लिख के, that's okay for the syllabus, fine. Of course, स्वातिका में खाले तो marks भी इतना जरूरी है. But as I said, to pay attention to the meanings between the lines. When she makes comments on each and every critic, it's a part of what we are going to be, what kind of person we are going to be in future life. It affects, it will be a part of your makeup as a person who makes important decisions in life. So these critical theories are not just part of syllabus, but they can be used as aids, as tools, as weapons पढ़ेंगे सिलेबस के टॉपिक की तरह भी पढ़ेंगे, लेकिन जैसे मैंने कहा ट्राई टू ग्रास्प द रियल सेंस बिहाइंड दिस। ये सिर्फ सिलेबस का पार्ट नहीं है, मैं फिर से बोल रही हूँ, इसको लाइफ स्किल की तरह क्रिटिसिज्म कैसे अच्छा क्रिटिक बनना है सो दैट वी कैन चूज आवर बेस्ट फॉर आवरसेल्व्स, इस तरह से ये लेक्चर सुनेंगे और समझने की कोशिश करेंगे। थैंक यू।
So, yes, friends, as Rashmi ma'am very rightly pointed out, that the concepts which we are going to discuss today are not only meant for your syllabus, they are meant for our lives. How you are going to implement some of these concepts directly or maybe indirectly in your future life. So that is what we are going to see. Without much ado, let us start. So, postmodern schools of literary criticism, that is the topic. First of all, before we go into some of the critical concepts, I'll just briefly point out what is postmodernism. Now, postmodernism, just for your information, is written in two ways. Post, then hyphen, dash, and modernism. Alright? Post, hyphen, that is dash, modernism. Or it is written as one word, postmodernism. What is the difference? Some of you might have this question. So the first word, post-modernism, is an umbrella term. It's a larger term which includes all the ideas associated with what is known as postmodernism. But when we use postmodernism as one word, it is used to refer to a critique of postmodernism. What are the allied fields which are associated with the term postmodernism? It may include literature, art, films, and several other areas of our life. Alright? Okay. Now let us delve into what is postmodernism. So postmodernism began to take shape between the two world wars, and it is basically associated with a way of life, a way of feeling, and a state of mind. Postmodernism is a state of mind. It is about the thinking process. And today, I invite all of you to put on your thinking hats, because you will be required to do a lot of mental jugglery here. So be ready to delve deeper into your minds, and let us bring out some of the gems which will come out at the end of this session. Alright. So in postmodernism, everything and anything that is authoritative or rigid or serious is subverted. Subverted means it is attacked, or it is questioned, or sometimes it is mocked, it is laughed at also. What postmodernism tries to do is to destabilize some of the earlier concepts and theories and way of thinking. So this is a total shift from the earlier way of thinking. As soon as we enter the 20th century, particularly the post-war period, saw rapid changes in all walks of life. In all areas of life, there were so many changes taking place, and they were going hand in hand with one another. So it was a period of a lot of flux, lot of uncertainty. And this is what is represented by postmodernist literature, postmodernist art or architecture. So this postmodernism ushered in a new way of thinking where everything is questioned. Nothing is accepted as it is. In earlier times, it was said that if some of the masters like Plato and Aristotle said so, it had to be followed without questioning. That was the kind of attitude of even critics. But when we enter the era of postmodernism, everything is questioned. Nothing failed as it is. So this postmodernism, as a result of the new questioning, created new ways of thinking also, and because it was questioning everything, naturally it led to a lot of troubles. Because questioning always leads to troubles. When you accept something without questioning it, there is no problem. But when someone raises the questions, naturally it poses several issues, several problems. And another very major, very important thing which you all need to remember here is that one theory has influenced another theory. And many a times you will see that there is a mixing of different theories also. So we may study these theories separately today, but at the same time we must also remember that one theory has influenced another theory, and many a times there is an interplay of theories. So you cannot study all these theories in isolation. They converge on certain points, means that they meet on certain points and disagree on many other things. So postmodernism is basically about fragmentation. Fragmentation means breaking apart of things. The first theory that we are going to discuss today is the theory of deconstruction. Who propounded the theory of deconstruction? Jacques Derrida. So all of you are familiar with the name Jacques Derrida. So deconstruction is a philosophical and critical theory that was developed by a French philosopher named Jacques Derrida in the 1960s. One of the most important lectures of Jacques Derrida is Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of the Human Sciences, which was delivered at Johns Hopkins University in United States of America in 1966. And this lecture created a lot of ripples all across the world. It is one of the most challenged and challenging theories of the 20th century. Now, the word human sciences, which is used in this title, what does it mean? It includes literature and other allied disciplines like psychology, philosophy, politics, and linguistics. Now, origins of deconstruction can also be found in two major works written by Derrida. One is Writing and Difference, and the other is Of Grammatology. These are the two major works which also discuss Derrida's views on deconstruction. Now, what is deconstruction? So basically, deconstruction challenges the idea that language can accurately represent reality or convey stable meanings. We are going to see what this means, alright? But the basic premise of deconstruction is that language is not stable. It is not solid. Alright. So, Derrida believed that texts do not have a single fixed meaning, but they are full of contradictions and ambiguities. Now, the traditional criticism so far always looked for fixed meanings in the works of literature. Here comes a person who totally turns everything upside down. And he says that whatever that we have believed so far does not hold any ground. And everything that we consider to be very solid, very accurate, doesn't hold any meaning. So it is, in short, if I have to put it very simply, it is about meaninglessness of meaning. Alright. Now, deconstruction is a critique and continuation of structuralism. Structuralism was a movement which came before Derrida. Alright, and Derrida presents his critique, his comments on structuralism. Structuralism, as most of you know, was developed by a Swiss linguist named Ferdinand Saussure, and then later on it was further developed by a structural anthropologist named Claude Lévi-Strauss. So, what is deconstruction and how is it related to structuralism? How does it offer critique of structuralism? Because before we start talking about deconstruction, we have to briefly understand what is structuralism. Because without understanding structuralism, we cannot fully comprehend what is meant by deconstruction. So, structuralism believes that everything we perceive and receive is a result of language. Language is a structure and a system of science. Everything that we know in this world is a result of language. So the words that we speak is referred to as signs. And these signs have two parts. One is called signifier, another is called signifier. Signifier means the word and signifier is the meaning. For example, if I say the word dog, D-O-G, dog, right? Now, if you look at the dictionary meaning of the word, it will say that it is an animal. And it will give you some brief description of an animal called dog. But does a dog mean only an animal to us people? There are several meanings associated with the word dog. What can you think of when you hear this word dog? Let me hear some responses from you. What does a dog signify? Faithfulness, loyalty, yes.
Pet. Protector.
As a pet,
Protector.
as a protector. As a symbol of unconditional love. A dog gives you unconditional love. There are no conditions. Usually in every relationship, conditions apply is always there. Maybe not very visible, but invisibility is there. But man-dog relationship or woman-dog relationship, there are no conditions. Alright, so yes. Sorry? Dangerous, yes, right. And particularly at night, when we are walking on the roads, dogs pose some threat to us also. So anyway, the thing here is that signifier, the word is one, but it carries multiple meanings. So signifiers are many, and it varies from person to person. So there cannot be any one meaning. Right? That is what we have to keep in mind. So signifier is the sound image. Now another thing that structuralists, the linguists say is that what we speak is not language. What we speak are the sounds of that language. These sounds are given a particular shape, a particular structure. It could be at the word level, at the sentence level, and then we decipher meaning out of it. Alright. But basically, language is in the form of sounds. So, sound image is there. So, when I say the word dog, da or g, these are the sounds. Alright. And the signified is the concept. It means what is the meaning of that word. So, sound image word when it is linked with a concept. So the sound d or g is linked with the image of the dog, and we get meaning out of it. Clear? Okay. Now this relationship between signifier and signified is arbitrary, which means it is unclear. As we just looked at the word dog, this is very arbitrary, that for one person the word dog may mean something, for another person the word dog means something else. Alright, so this is the arbitrary connection. And signifiers do not refer to things in the world but to concepts in the mind. So it is the concept which is very important. Alright. Now, another aspect of structuralism is that the language presents the idea of the center, and everything moves around this center. So, this idea is something which is at the core of structuralism. That language, because it has a structure, it creates the idea of center, and it leads to what is called hierarchical structure. So what we understand in this world has a hierarchical structure. So structuralism lays emphasis on speech, and it privileges speech. It gives more importance to speech rather than to writing. This is what is termed by Derrida as phonocentrism and logocentrism. Right? Okay. So, Western philosophical concepts emphasize that speech requires the presence of the speaker. Whenever we talk about speech, it indirectly means that speaker is present, at least at that point of time when someone was making a speech, even if it happened in the past, the idea is implied that there was a speaker. So the written word is a graphic representation of the spoken word. Alright. So when we write D-O-G, that is the graphic representation of the O-G. Alright. Sounds D-O-G, which is graphically represented by this alphabet D-O-G. Okay? Now let's move on to some of the key concepts of deconstruction. So Derrida deviates from structuralism. He goes slightly different. He takes a different path from earlier critics, structuralist critics particularly. So he questions the notions of the structure of language. Structuralism says that language is a reliable source of communication. How do we communicate in this world? With the help of language. No language, no communication. We can think about body language, we can think about sign language also, where direct correspondence is not required. But it has very limited scope. We cannot communicate all ideas and all thoughts using body language or sign language. It has inherent limitations. So for any living person, language is required for communication. But Derrida does not consider language as a reliable source of communication. We think that language is a reliable source of communication. I say something and I believe that the other person will understand what I am trying to say. But many times we have seen that language creates misunderstanding. Rather than creating understanding, it leads to misunderstanding. Many times we have to clarify ourselves by saying that I did not mean that. मैंने ऐसा नहीं कहा था. मेरा मतलब ये नहीं था. Alright. So language is not 100% reliable mode of communication. And because language, why it is not a reliable mode of communication? Because it does not operate in a timely way. Because what I mean in my mind may not come across as the same thing in the listener's mind. Okay. So this lacuna is always going to be there. This gap will always be there. But then, having said that, we also need to remember that we cannot do away with language. Even if language is problematic, we have to make use of language. That is the only way in which we can communicate with people in this world. So, but deconstruction, Vega is saying that a word does not have a fixed meaning as structure I said. Language does not possess stability or solidity as we think it has. It is not stable, it is fluid and slippery. And it creates what is called likely meanings. Not exact meanings, but likely meanings. Language is full of contradictions and associations. Look at this example, the word ice cream. Now the word ice cream is not only a food item. It has several associations of joy, of celebration, of happiness, of hot summer days and getting yourself cooled with a scoop of ice cream. So many, vacations, playing with your friends. There are so many associations which come up to our mind when we think of the word ice cream. So this is the slipperiness of language, that it cannot have a fixed meaning. Alright. Recently, I will give you just one example. I recently met one of my relatives, and this is about associations. We were just talking about going to Mumbai, and that relative of mine said that I do not like Mumbai. Now, many of us were looking forward to this visit for some social gathering and all these things, but that particular relative said that I do not like going to Mumbai. Why? Because he had a daughter who was mentally challenged, and when the daughter was alive, she is no longer here, but when the daughter was alive, every month the parents had to take that child to see a doctor who used to come from Germany once a month in Mumbai. So Mumbai is associated, going to Mumbai is associated with pain. It is associated with losing your child. It is associated with dealing with a mentally challenged child. So there is a meaning. For us, Mumbai was something about celebration, family coming together and all these things. For that particular person, it is pain. So this is how meaning keeps on changing, right? Another signifier which is used here is bed, alright? So bed has multiple signifiers, multiple meanings, like a piece of furniture which is used for sleeping, alright? Then the bottom of something, sea bed, river bed, that is also conveyed by the word bed. It is a piece of ground used for growing plants, flower bed, where plants are grown, kyaro. Right. So flower bed. Then layer of rock or stratum. When rock is formed, it has multiple layers, and that is also called the bottom of that rock is called bed. Alright. So it has multiple meanings. The word bed, if someone says bed, it carries multiple meaning, and it is only the mental trace left behind by the signifiers that we take to be the meaning. So it is the mental trace which we consider to be meaning. the meaning of a word has traces of many other things. Right? So one word has traces of many other things. For example, the color red is red because it is not blue, black, white, yellow, green, whatever. So red carries a distinct meaning because it is not any other color. So another very important key concept that Derrida discusses is the concept of binary opposition. So Derrida argues that in Western culture, people tend to think and express their thoughts in terms of binary opposites. What are binary opposites? White, black, masculine, feminine, conscious, unconscious, presence, absence, speech, writing. These are binary opposites. But Derrida suggests that these oppositions are hierarchies in miniature containing one term that Western culture views as positive or superior and another is considered negative or inferior. Look at these two examples. Good and bad. Dark and light. These are the binaries. Now, good is considered to be superior, bad is inferior. Dark is inferior, light is superior. This is hierarchy, which means one thing is placed above other or below other, whatever the case may be. This is the hierarchical structure which is created because of the binary opposition which is inherently present in any language. દુનિયાની કોઈ પણ ભાષા હોય એમાં આવા બાઇનરી ઓપોઝિટ્સ રહેવાના જ છે અને એકનું મહત્વ બીજા કરતા વધારે ઓટોમેટિકલી થઈ જવાનું છે કે કારણ કે એની સાથે મીનિંગ અટેચ કરેલો છે માટે એ વર્ડની અંદર the word itself does not carry any fixed meaning. It is the mental trace which is left behind by that word which creates meaning, the associations and all these things. Right? So, Derrida argued that these oppositions must be disrupted to reveal the instability of meaning. He was in favor of disrupting everything. Not this, not this. You know, in our Vedantic philosophy, we have a concept of neti, neti. Now iti, neti. Not this, not this, not this. So you go on removing everything and then ultimately what is left is the true essence, the Brahman. It is called the Brahman. Alright. Similarly, many times I find that there is a close connection between Derrida's concept of deconstruction and some of the Indian philosophical concepts, particularly Vedantic concepts. And we need to study them in detail. I'm not an expert, that's why I don't want to go further into it. Through deconstruction, Derrida tries to erase the boundary between these binary opposites and to do so in such a way that the hierarchy implied by the oppositions is thrown into question. So he questions the concept of binary opposites. Because when we say binary opposites, it is about privileging one over the other, giving more importance of one thought, one idea, and undermining the value of another word or another idea. And he does not believe in any fixed notions. So, in popular conception, light and dark are opposites. But when you think about it, not only are they opposites, light is favored over dark. We always shun darkness. Nobody likes to be in the dark. Everyone is looking towards light. So, darkness is undergone. And here fair and lovely. So light and dark have multiple associations which are challenged. And here also in the color of the skin. Light color is favored compared to the darker skin tone. That is where the whole problem arises. Superiority of the white-skinned people and inferiority of dark-skinned colored individuals. So data is very relevant even in the present day times. So deconstruction, as the name suggests, seeks to pick these intricate connections and presumptions apart through close analysis. It breaks apart everything which is considered to be sacrosanct so far. And critics and philosophers like Paul Deman and Geoffrey Hartman are other notable deconstructionists other than Derrida. Now there are three major words which are used by Derrida, which are of greater importance for us. One is difference, a French word. Alright? So, difference means this term was, by the way, coined by Derrida. It's a combination of two words, difference and deferral. So, differ meaning to differ, different, separate, alag. And defer means to defer. Defer means to delay, to postpone. So meaning has to be postponed. How? We are going to see that. So it suggests that meaning is always delayed and depends on the system of differences between words and concepts. Where does the meaning lie? It depends on the system of differences, binary opposites. And the meaning gets delayed also. It has to be postponed. You cannot arrive at the meaning at a particular point of time. It has to be delayed. It keeps on changing. This means that words do not have intrinsic meanings and they rely on other words for meaning, creating endless chain of signifiers. We have already seen this with the example. I'll give you just one more example. The word tree may evoke certain images or ideas, but its meaning can never be fully pinned down because it is defined in relation to other words such as leaf, wood, forest. And these words also have their own associations. So tree is not an isolated tree. Secondly, the idea of tree which is created in the mind of a person also varies. For someone it could be a small tree, for someone it could be a big tree, varieties of trees, all kinds of trees that you can think of. Alright. Second concept in deconstruction is textual instability. So deconstruction asserts that meaning is not fixed. It is not stable, but keeps on changing. So a text is always open to multiple interpretations because language is inherently unstable. It creates likely meanings. You don't have any fixed meanings. And each interpretation brings new meanings that cannot be fully controlled or predicted. And that is why we go on saying that, I did not mean this. This is not what I was trying to convey. Every time this problem occurs, it is because of this inherent instability of language. So language creates likely meanings but not exact meanings, and literature which is composed in language is therefore unstable and dynamic. And meaning is created by the reader. Deconstructionists say that meaning does not lie in the text. Text does not have any meaning. Meaning is created by the reader. It is the interpretation of the reader, which is of primary importance for a deconstructionist. And the same reader reading the same text today and after 5 years, there is a possibility that the reader will arrive at a meaning after reading that book after 5 years or so. Alright. So meaning is shifting and it is not present in the text. So deconstructionist reading looks for meaning in the text that stand in conflict with what is read as the main theme. So far, we are used to treat literature, literary text, literary works as what is the main theme? What is the central idea? There is no central idea. There is no one theme or two themes. It is fluid. It keeps on changing. It is flexible. So, deconstructionists have divided criticism into two types. One is called metaphysical and another is called deconstructive. Metaphysical criticism presupposes that the text has a fixed meaning which the critic is supposed to explain. So, this is the traditional view. He critiques Plato and Aristotle and other earlier critics also, Western critics also, and he questions some of these metaphysical concepts where it is assumed that the text has a fixed meaning. That is a metaphysical way of looking at literary text. But deconstructive criticism believes in the intermediacy of meaning. There's a spelling mistake. Intermediacy of meaning. Alright. So there is an interplay of meanings. It has to shift. It has to move. It is flowing. It is something which keeps on changing. It depends on the mindset of the reader. Alright. So the author affirms and unaffirms, which means author says something and then at the same time unaffirms it. The author says something and then says that also. So how do we evaluate text applying the concepts of deconstruction? Now the practical part. After learning about deconstruction, which challenges some of the traditional notions of language, if you have to apply these theoretical principles in the evaluation of literary criticism, then how do we do it? So, deconstruction involves close reading of literary text. There is no superficial reading allowed. One needs to read the text very closely because any text has contradictory meanings and these meanings keep on changing. So he dismisses the assumptions of literary analysis and tries to look for binary opposites like day, night, nature, culture, man, woman, speech, writing. Now, traditional literary criticism focuses on one theme with only one or two meanings, and it is believed that the author is in control of the text. The text is written by the author and the author means X, Y, Z things. Literary works have external relevance as per deconstructions. For example, Shakespeare's plays are analyzed keeping in view the Elizabethan society and the political conditions. A set of interpretative tools are reliably used to interpret a literary text, like figures of speech, thematic concerns. This is how we have been doing literary criticism or appreciation of literary works. Right? You get questions like discuss greater themes in Shakespeare's King Lear. Or if it's a poem, you evaluate some of the aspects, technical aspects of that language, what kind of figurative language is used by the poet. traditional way of analyzing literary text. But deconstruction says there is no one thing or central idea. Authors are constantly under erasure. Constantly under erasure. Erasure means questioning. So it tries to challenge the established notions and rely on the idea of the center. Deconstruction is said there is no center. There is nothing which is main theme, main idea, main theme or something like that. It totally dismantles the idea of privileging one idea or word over another idea. And it pulls apart text layer by layer. This is like a postmortem. Postmortem of the literary text. Here you pull apart each aspect and then try to find the meaning and then say that this is not the exact meaning. It change. So there is no true meaning in the text and it is created by the reader every time the reader reads that text. So multiple of meanings are there which leads to what is called textual harassment. Because human mind is programmed to think in such a way that we want something which is stable. We cannot always go on thinking about instability. Something new, something novel may appeal to us for a temporary period of time. Temporarily it may sound very attractive. But then it is human nature. Dr. Johnson, while commenting on Shakespearean plays, in preface to the plays of Shakespeare, he has pointed this habit of human nature, this tendency of human mind very, very beautifully. He says that something that is new may appeal to us temporarily, but we go on to the same thing, same ideas, stable ideas again and again. And this is a major problem with deconstruction, that it leads to textual harassment. But why deconstruction is important? Because it heavily influenced postmodern philosophy, intellectual thought, and literary criticism, and it remains one of the most widely discussed theories in postmodern times. And many of the famous literary works are studied using the techniques of deconstruction to find out new meanings out of them. Now there are certain problems with deconstruction because many later critics disagree with Derrida. They have questioned some of the tenets of deconstruction. One of the major concerns of later critics is that this theory is impractical because it creates a lot of instability. Every time you try to find a new meaning, then where is the meaning? What do we look for in literature? That is the question that arises. That is the problem with deconstruction. Because if all interpretation is misinterpretation, and if all criticism is an engagement with the critic's misconstruction, why bother about interpretation? Why should we have interpretation of literary texts? So there are certain charges which are laid at the door of deconstruction. One charge is that of hypocrisy. That if it questions, why hypocrisy? That if it questions the importance of language as a tool of communication, why do the deconstructionists write? If language is not stable, they have a problem with language, then why do you write? There is no need for you to write if you have a big problem with that. So these are some of the charges, and if the deconstruction is saying that language is inadequate, insufficient, charges also which are leveled against deconstruction, but at the same time we also have to bear in mind that deconstruction has led to several new ways of thinking. Even deconstruction is applied in the field of mathematics, in the field of architecture, in the field of gastronomy. Gastronomy is the art and science of making food. Nowadays we get to see fusion food. So Mexican carne, that is a deconstructionist idea. Alright. The next theoretical concept is new historicism. New historicism began in the late 1970s and early 1980s in the United States of America, and this was influenced by post-modernist ideas of Foucault and Derrida. Foucault, Michel Foucault, his analysis of cultural history, discussions of social structures in terms of power, particularly Foucault talks about power structures in our society. Power basically creates social structures like family. The smallest unit of any society is family. Within the family also there is a power structure. Someone is the head of the family, and that person makes majority of the decisions. And most of the patriarchal societies, usually it is the male figure who is the head of the family. Most of the time, not always, but in majority of the cases. Right. So thereafter comes maybe, so you have the father, then you have the mother, then you have the children. Now within the children also, again, power structure. The eldest one, if there are 3-4 children, if single child is there, no problem. But if there are more than 2-3 children, again power structure comes into place. So the eldest one will dominate over others. So this is a power structure that Foucault has discussed. The idea of the nation, similarly, who is a powerful nation? Again, it is about power structure. And international relations are also based on that. What is Trump doing these days? Same thing, power structure. If you increase our tariffs, we will be targeted. That is what he said, right? This is power structure. So, who is in power will dominate over others, and they will decide everything. What is good, what is bad, that is also decided by people who enjoy power. Now, when we talk about new historicism, an American theorist named Stephen Greenblatt made new historicism very popular, and he wrote an essay called Towards a Poetics of the Culture, where he has discussed these ideas on new historicism. Now, this new historicism is a reaction against new criticism and formalism, other literary movements of that time. New criticism or formalism consider literature to be independent of historical and authorial factors. Literary text has no connection with history or with the author. That is what new criticism believes in. That a text has no connection with the author or with the times in which the author lived. New historicism challenges these notions, these ideas, and believes that literature cannot be studied in isolation. There are so many forces which are at play when a text is being created. So it challenges comes and oh, thank you. New historicism sees the relationship between history and literature in a different way. New historicism is an interdisciplinary branch. It does not study literature or history in isolation. It combines the two, and the fields want to be separate or distinct from each other come together here in new historicism. Fields like history, religious studies, political science, sociology, psychology, philosophy, and natural sciences are also under the purview of new historicism. So new historicism does not concentrate on kings or queens or nobles and battles.
Those who want to leave, they may leave. एक करके ना करता, जब लोग बात करें, ऐसे करना. Those who want to leave immediately, एक करके नहीं जाओ. Therefore, this is the फटाफट निकल जाओ जरा जाओ. जैसे शिकवान को जैसे जैसे काम इम्पोर्टेंट है. जल्दी थी फास्ट एकदम फास्ट
Alright, let's continue. So, new historicism focuses on smaller details of history, which includes not only great kings and queens and great battles and rise and fall of great empires or individuals, but they also focus on very small details. The plight of the common people, popular songs and art at that point of time, periodicals, magazines, journals which are popular and in a particular historical period. Even advertisements are also studied along with literature in new historicism. So what are the major aspects of new historicism? Textuality of history and historicity of text. This was the phrase used by Louis Manchot. Textuality of history and historicity of text. Now, as we have already seen that history narrates whatever that happened in the past, we do not have access to the fully lived experiences. If we want to know about the Elizabethan times in English literature, we are in the 21st century, we do not know what kind of life was there in Elizabethan times. Or even in our country, if you want to know about our freedom struggle or India's past, maybe 2000 years ago, what kind of life was there, we do not have full access to that period. So, the only access, how do we come to know about the life which was there some 500 years ago or some 1000 years ago? It is through history, the historical narratives, which is history books. New historicism says that objectivity of history is a myth. It is never objective. Now, the traditional view of history important question. So history does not contain facts. It contains facts, but not 100% facts. It is not 100% factual. There are certain facts which are taken by the historian, but then the interpretation of the historian also come into play. Here I have given you one example that the British Raj in our country. Now, if we take one incident, one freedom movement, say for example Dandi March. Now, if an Indian historian were to write about Dandi March, the narrative is going to be different from the report or the history which is written by a white person, a British person. Right? Because a British person a Britisher will view it as a kind of rebellion, going against the powers, going against the authorities. Whereas from an Indian's point of view, Indian historian's point of view, it is fight for freedom. So, the facts will be, certain facts will remain the same. But then how it is presented is going to change. So, the question is it purely objective or it is subjective? So the answer is very clear that it is to a certain extent subjective, which means personal opinions also come into play. Now there are a few key concepts in new historicism. First is historical context. So new historicism does not approve of separating history and literature, and it tries to erase the boundaries between history consideration. History cannot be taken as a singular text. Works of literature are also a record of the history of the time in which they were written, and history is also another text like literature, and literature is another cultural artifact that is history. So to study a text, one needs to study the historical background of the writer. New critics say that writer and the text are different things. New historicism says that we have to study the background of the writer, because every writer is a product of his or her own time. Whatever that is happening around that writer, whatever socio-political, economic conditions are prevailing at that particular time, naturally these things are going to have impact on the writer's writing. So, every writer's opinion is formed on the basis of the times in which he or she lives. For example, Industrial Revolution in England, there was texts like Bleak House, Hard Times, Chimney Sweeper. Now, when we study these texts, we come to know about the effect of Industrial Revolution on the social life of people. So, Industrial Revolution is a historical phenomenon. Right? Industrial Revolution is a historical phenomenon which happened during the Victorian period. When we read a history book may give us certain facts about the Industrial Revolution. But when we read literature, literary texts which were produced at the time, we get to know about the socio-economic conditions of people. I'll just briefly give you the example of Chimney Sweeper. Chimney Sweeper, a wonderful poem which narrates the life of small children who work as chimney sweepers. Chimney, in earlier houses, they used to have fireplace. Even today, in some northern parts of our country, clean. So for cleaning it, there were no machines available at that time. So someone had to get inside the chimney. Now who can go inside that small hole, small pillar? Only small children. So very young children, 5, 6, 7-year-old children, were given this task of cleaning the chimneys. They would get up early in the morning because the chimneys had to be cleaned in the morning before everyone in the house woke up, usually. So they would get up early in the morning before sunrise. They will go out in the streets shouting, whether anyone needs their help. They will carry their bag of cleaning clothes and brush and all these things. They will go to some houses, enter the chimney, clean it, and then come out. Now here in this poem, the poet has described the plight of the chimney sweepers. That chimney sweepers, some boys, they have a dream. And what do they dream about? They dream about plunging into river, taking a dip into the river, and emerging very clean out of that river. Because usually these chimney sweepers are covered with soot when they enter the chimney. Their hair also, gets covered with the soot, black, it becomes black. So in their dream, they dream about clean bodies, clean clothes, being loved by people. Because usually, these chimney sweepers they belong to very poor communities. Many of them were orphans, street children. They had no one to take care of them. So in their dreams, they think about love, care, being clean, being fed. So this aspect of industrial revolution is presented to us. The other side of industrial revolution is presented to us in literature. Alright. So socio-economic condition of the labor class, that is revealed through these texts. Another aspect of historical context is that literary text is document of historical event or period. It is not an exact record of facts, but still it is a document of social history. I have taken here the example of W.K. Yeats's poem Easter 1916, which is about Irish independence movement. Irish people were fighting against the British or the English people. And there was a movement which took place where the Irish people gathered to fight against the British forces. Now the leaders of this Irish independence movement staged a revolt. It was a short-lived revolt. It did not last for a very long time. But it was Easter week. Easter is a Christian festival which needs to be celebrated. It's about the rebirth of Jesus Christ. And we staged this revolt during this festival. This rebellion was quickly ended by the British forces because many leaders were killed. They were executed or sent to jail. And therefore, this rebellion did not last for a very long time. Now see, when we read this poem, and if we compare it with certain journals, this is a picture of a journal that I have taken here, you will see that this is a record, historical record. This is a historical text. Alright. Whereas a poem is a literary document of history. With this poem, you will find certain facts. But the way poet has presented these facts is fictitious, manipulative, and it is full of emotions of people who have lost their lives, who were brutally executed by the British forces. So by looking at some of the historical documents, a reader might understand the allusions that he makes to each of the Irish leaders. We come to know about the Irish leaders who were executed. If we compare the historical document with the literary document, and it tells us about this very gory event which happened in Ireland's past. So that is one concept. Another concept is about power structures. So new historicism considers major role played by power relations. Texts are read to examine the working of power. For example, the Fairy Queen. Now this poem is written in praise of Queen Elizabeth I. So the Queen was in power, and the poet writes a poem praising the good qualities of the Queen. So who is at the power matters a lot in literature. So when we are studying a work of literature, you cannot study in isolation. You cannot separate the writer, the author from the social background, the political background. That is very important. So through a literary text, we come to know who is at the power because it plays an important role in deciding the subject. Ideologies of religion, culture, and other power structures influence literary texts. Just to give you another example, how many times we have seen here in this slides, we have seen that how historical events have influenced literature, like Easter 1960. Alright, something happened in the past in history that gave birth to this poem. Alright, so history influencing literary text. I give you another example how literary text influences history. The finest example is that of Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, which is about the slavery system in America. It depicts the plight of black African slaves. And as per one anecdote, it is said that Abraham Lincoln once met Harriet Beecher Stowe and he said, "You are that little woman who started the Civil War in America. You are that little woman who started the Civil War in America." So, by that, it means that Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel Uncle Tom's Cabin impacted Civil War in America, and after that, the slavery system was abolished. So, this is the impact of literature on a historical event. Now, when you are studying Uncle Tom's Cabin, applying the principles of new historicism, you have to study not only the literary text, you have to study all the other historical records also. This is how intertextuality of history and historicity of text needs to be studied. So, key areas of new historicism, it focuses on marginalized voices in text because traditional historians focused only on lives of kings and queens and noble people and great battles and all these things. New historicism not only literature but history also tries to study marginalized people, ordinary working class individuals. Mainstream history presented a singular perspective story also, and marginalized voices which were usually ignored by mainstream historians are now studied, and it includes race, caste, gender, sexuality, disabilities, animal studies. All these things come under the purview of new historicism. So it is based on the parallel reading. New historicism requires parallel reading of a literary text and a historical text or a non-literary text. Not only historical text, but non-literary text like journals, newspaper articles, magazine articles, advertisements, sociological documents. All these things also have to be studied by analyzing our work of literature. So here there is an example of Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. So when we study Jude the Obscure applying new historicism, then we do not see it as a text, but we have to consider the non-literary texts also which were prevailing at that time by the writing of the novel. Social conventions which were prevalent at that time, marriage laws particularly. So law books also need to be studied. And after a deep analysis of all these non-literary texts, one can arrive at the right conclusion. Alright. So yes, I have this. Let's go over to the next one. Cultural materialism. New historicism and cultural materialism are almost the same. One is an American movement, another is a British movement. But there are several parallels between the two. So cultural materialism is associated with new historicism, and cultural materialism, this term was coined by Raymond Williams. In his essay, Notes on Marxism in Britain. There is one major book, Political Shakespeare, written by Jonathan Sawyer and Alan Seyfried, which made cultural materialism a very popular movement, and they have played a pivotal role in the development of this movement. So there are four defining characteristics of cultural materialism. First is historical context, then close to analysis, critical commitment, and theoretical manner. So let's look at some of the features of cultural materialism. It is concerned with understanding the ideological functions of literature, and it believes that literature reflects and contributes to the larger structure of society, and cultural artifacts like novels or plays or poems are not neutral but are shaped by and help to reinforce certain power structures. So literature is not neutral, but it also has its impact on power structures. Just now we talked about Uncle Tom's Cabin. Okay, so it totally turned down the power structure. Right? The African slaves who were subjugated, they got some rights, they got some power after the civil war. So this is the impact which literature has. So literature is not something which is passive. It has far greater implications than we accept it has. So literature is seen as a site where dominant ideologies such as capitalism, colonialism, or patriarchy drunken is considered to be one of the greatest sins. Right? It is not only about murdering someone. It is about killing a king who is a representative of God. Alright? So these are some of the things which one needs to understand. And I think more or less is the same thing. So let's see. Okay. So just to summarize this, cultural materialism grew out of Marxism. Marxism, which talks about equality of classes. It talks about power structures, superstructure. Alright? And who is at the power will decide what is right and what is wrong. Now, cultural materialism dismantles this whole ideology. British critic Raymond Williams gave this term cultural materialism and made it popular. The major argument is that culture of the working classes is never taken into consideration in highbrow criticism of literature. You know, most of the time, dominant class produced literature, consumed literature, and critiqued literature. Ordinary people, their works, their voices, these were all silenced. They were never brought to the limelight. Cultural materialism tries to unearth these works which were pushed to the margins and tries to bring them to the limelight, to the forefront. So they demolish the distinction between high art and low art. There is nothing like high art and low art. Everything is to be studied, everything is to be analyzed, and mainstream and marginalized. This distinction also needs to be eliminated. It has to be removed. So everyone is a product of the culture in which he or she lives. Our thoughts, our beliefs, our lifestyle, everything is shaped by cultural influences. Do you agree to this? The culture in which we grow influences everything we do. Now, doing away with certain sections of society is criminal, because everyone who lives in that society is a part of culture. Then why pay attention only to the mainstream or the persons who hold power or the persons who belong to our class or our caste? Why ordinary individuals are not even prominent? They also have to have some role in defining, in shaping the culture. So, it is very difficult to define culture. It varies. The idea of culture is a very wide term, and it varies from person to person, country to community to community. But what is considered a low by dominant ruling culture produces forms of art which transform and affect the whole culture. So the dominant class usually decides that this is good culture, this is great art, and whatever that is written by the marginalized is to be discarded. So dominant class has more say in deciding what is good culture. But cultural materialism says that culture is a process and it keeps on changing. It is not fixed. Race, gender, socio-economic factor, ethnicity, sexual differences, all these things are included in cultural materialism. Next movement is post-colonial criticism. Thank you for your patience. I know, squeezing all these literary movements is a challenge, and to sit here is a bigger challenge globally to fight for their freedom. So, post-colonialism is a literary theory that focuses on the impacts of colonialism. Now, what do we mean by colonialism? Colonialism tried to undermine the culture of the native people. The colonizers, the colonial masters always establish the fact that our culture is the best. Our way of life is the best. Our language is the best. Your culture, your language, your way of life, your literature, it does not matter. And the irony is that most of the countries which were ruled over by these colonial masters had a very rich cultural history, very rich cultural past. But that was undermined. And therefore, colonialism is not only political victory, it is a psychological victory also. It captures, it penetrates into the minds of the people. The psyche of the people changes absolutely. So, what do they say? That natives are uncivilized, uncultured, and their way of life is useless. Many years ago, even today in some places, India is considered to be a land of snake charmers. Madariyoનો દેશ. એવી એક ઓળખ આપણને આપવામાં આવી છે, એવું એક લેબલ આપણને આપવામાં આવ્યું. Which means that they denied the rich cultural heritage that we have. And we were called uncivilized, uncouth, generally. This was the label given to us. So, colonized countries started to believing themselves to be inferior. This is the mindset. Attack on the mindset that they started to believe that we are inferior to the colonial masters, and it's not a political victory but a psychological victory, as I already mentioned. So it changed the way the native people looked at their own identity, their own culture. Now, after gaining independence, post-colonialism tries to dismantle the superiority of the colonial masters, and it tries to establish the importance of the colonized people. Because the colonial masters were very smart. They never talked about their domination. Recently some videos are being circulated where some people talk about the kind of history which is taught in British schools. There's one historian, I've forgotten his name, he was recently here in Ahmedabad also, he visited SET University. Forgotten his name. Anyway, he has made some very good comments. He's a British individual, but he says that the rich history that India has is never talked about in British schools. And not only that, the domination, the atrocities which were carried out on the Indians during the British Empire, during the rule of the British Empire, it is that the British kids, they never learn about it. They don't know. This past is totally erased. So they always remain silent on what wrongs they have done to the colonized individuals. So they thought that we are at the center, and was challenged by post-colonial writers. They say, post-colonial writers say that colonized people also have their own language, they have their own stories, they have their own culture, and it should not be undermined or neglected. So post-colonial criticism celebrates multiculturalism. It talks about different cultures. It does not give importance only to one culture. It celebrates multiculturalism. And other cultures also need to be given importance. They have studied some of the literary texts also with the part of post-colonialism. We have seen that. But first, let us see the three phases of post-colonialism. First phase is adopt. Adopt means what? To take something and use it. So, European models were in this phase of post-colonialism. European models were imitated. Why? Because for so many years, the colonized people had seen only the colonial masters. And therefore, naturally, they imitated the colonial masters. Even after gaining freedom. Yesterday, in Swatina's lecture, by talking about Indian poetry, she talked about this point, that many of the Indian poets were imitating the styling, the writing style of English writers. Toruda, for example. There is a major influence of romantic writers on the writing style of Toruda. Alright, so adopting the ways of the European masters. Okay, second phase is adapt. Adapt means to become familiar with a new situation and to change your behavior according to new requirements. That is adaptation. So native or indigenous texts started to gain prominence in the second phase of post-colonialism. And then the third phase is that of adapt. Adapt here means good or skillful at something, mastery over something. So literature now in the third phase. Now every movement when it starts, when it is in a very nascent stage, beginning, usually any movement if we see always relies on something else. But then gradually when it develops a very strong foundation. It develops its own concepts. So this happened with the post-colonialism also. So when we reach the third phase of colonialism, now the writers have become skillful. And they know how to write and they have developed their own writing style. Like in Indian poetry, what is called, what is labeled as new poets, Mr. Zekiel and other poets. They have developed their own style, particularly Mr. Zekiel. He makes use of Indian English. Goodbye Party for Miss Pushpa T.S. One of the most famous poems written by Mr. Zekiel. And it says that our dear sister, Miss Pushpa, is going foreign. Typical Indian way of saying. Miss Pushpa is smiling and smiling. She is never saying no. This is how Miss Pushpa is introduced in her farewell party. It's a humorous poem, but it makes use of Indian English. If you read Kantapura, there also famous work is Orientalism, and he argued that the West constructed a distorted view of the East or the Orient to justify imperialism and colonial dominance. So, in order to justify their domination over other countries, the Western world created certain narratives. And they portrayed the polarized people in a negative light. And that is what is known as Orientalism. The next exponent is Gayatri Spivak Chakraborty. Her most famous work is Can the Subaltern Speak? What is a subaltern, or who is a subaltern? So this term was originally given by Antonio Gramsci to refer to those groups in society who are under the hegemony of ruling elite class. Elite class who was ruling over others, and their domination was challenged. So hegemony means what? Control by one country, organization over other countries within a particular group. Alright, so we have military hegemony, political hegemony, economic hegemony. Alright. So subaltern is a population. Who are subalterns? It is a population which is socially, politically and geographically outside the hegemony power, which means they do not have any say in any of the workings of society. They are always kept outside. They are called subalterns. And Gayatri Spivak uses the term subaltern not only for the colonized people, but she also uses this term for women. Because women also in a patriarchal setup, they are also voiceless individuals. They are also pushed to the margin. Then the black people, people of color, their voices were also never heard. The working class individuals, the poor people, their voices were also never heard. In our country, with reference to, specifically with reference to our country, we talk about Dalit literature. Alright. The outcasts, the lowest community in our country. So Dalit literature was never in the mainstream literature. But nowadays, after shifting of this thought process, Dalit literature or Adivasi literature, Kashmir has written a wonderful paper also on Adivasi literature. So these marginalized voices gained prominence because of this thinking of post-colonialism. The third exponent. First one is Edward Said. Second one is Gayatri Chakraborty. Third one is Homi K. Bhabha. Do not confuse between Homi Bhabha, the scientist. He is a different person. This is, and that is why Homi K. Bhabha we have to say. Yes, Homi K. Bhabha, the scientist. So he is also another influential exponent of post-colonialism, and he gave the concepts like hybridity, mimicry, difference, and ambivalence. Bhabha's work challenges the notions of identity lost by the colonized people. Colonized people lost their identity. They had no idea who we are or who we were, because their mind was captured by the colonial masters, and the superiority of the colonial masters was so powerful that they lost their own identity. forgotten glory of the past culture. And the tendency of the colonial subjects of imitating the West is called mimicry. This is the word which is used by Bhabha. That in the initial phase of post-colonialism, the colonized people were imitating the ways of the colonial masters. That is called the phase of mimicry. So writers were trying to write like colonial masters. We have seen the example of Tolkien. Then there is double consciousness or double identity. There is another concept of double consciousness or double identity. So what does this mean? That the colonized people try to look at the world from their own perspective, from their cultural point of view, as well as from the point of view of the colonizers. So that creates a double identity, or what is called double consciousness. So there is this oscillation. Oscillation is moving from one thing to another. So between two cultures, in food, clothes, everything, we see this oscillation between Western culture and Eastern culture. Now, post-colonial writers examined the tempest, particularly, the starting point of post-colonialism is the examination of the Tempest by Shakespeare, where Caliban is colonized by Prospero. Now, just to briefly, tell you about Shakespeare's last play, The Tempest, where you have the central character called Prospero, who is a magician. His younger brother usurps his kingdom. And in order to save himself and his very young daughter's life, Prospero leaves the palace because he felt that his life was in danger. His brother might kill him. Alright. So he leaves the palace one night, he sits in the boat and he reaches one island. This island is a lonely island. Nobody lives there on this island except one creature, Caliban. Caliban is half human, half fish. And when Prospero reaches this island, Caliban was harassed by a witch named Cyclops. Prospero goes to him and tells him that I will free you from the clutches of this witch. But you will do whatever I ask you to do. You understand exactly what colonialism does? They come from a distant land. They come to us from a distant land. Then they say that we will help you. You are uncivilized. You are uncouth. You don't know anything. We will teach you what is culture, what is life, what is language, what is literature. We will teach you all these things. And in the process, you will learn so many things, but you will do whatever we ask you to do. So, Tempest is one of the best examples to study post-colonialism. So, this magician reaches the island and tries to control Caliban, and Prospero tells him, I will teach you my language. A classic case of colonialism. Now, as we know that language is part of culture, by learning language, one also learns culture. So, when we Indians started learning English language, we indirectly imbibed the Western culture also. Now, it is a debatable matter nowadays because we are living in an era of multiculturalism. So, sticking to one's culture, one's values, is it good, bad? There are multiple questions Prospero, if not superior. If he is not superior, he is equivalent to Prospero, equal to him. So here, Caliban is used as a metaphor for marginalized groups who have no voice, who have no language. And this includes women also, African black people, Asians and queers also. Another work examined by postcolonialism is Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. Here there is a character of Thomas Bertram who earns money through his estate that he owns in Antigua, a colonized country. It's a sugar plantation where African slaves are employed. And it forms a very small part in the novel, but the allusions, the references to the estate are allusions to that unsavory, undigestible part of black slavery system. And the sugar plantation and the slaves make Mansfield Park flourish. Why Mansfield Park is so rich? Because the African slaves are slogging in, now see, the relationship. Mansfield Park is in England. It is very rich. It's a huge mansion, huge area, very flourishing. Money comes from Antigua. Alright? So, somebody is working somewhere else, slogging over it and making this British house very rich, very wealthy. So, what do people see? People say, oh, how beautiful Mansfield Park is. Such wealthy people live in it. But who is making it rich? That is the question that needs to be addressed. Alright. So what is the importance of post-colonial criticism? It is useful for looking at modern texts and historical texts in a new light. It studies not only modern texts, it studies historical texts also, and adds a new discourse, a new way of thinking. It focuses on writing about cultural identity and dual identity, gives voice to the voiceless individuals. I would here in this context ask you to listen to a YouTube video by Miriam Makeba. Just a 5-minute video. I don't have enough time actually. But you can, just a 5-minute video, very beautifully, very succinctly, it describes what is colonialism, how it tries to undermine the indigenous cultures. When the white people went to Africa, they told the African people that, you don't exist. We have given you existence. She has very beautiful pointed this out. So I would strongly recommend you to watch this video. Particularly, she delivered a speech at the United Nations also, but I'm not talking about that speech. Because when you're looking for videos, focus on this topic. You can't expect to write the truth about Africa. That is the topic. Alright. The last one, trying your patience. Gender studies. So, gender studies is an offshoot of Marxism and feminism. It is an allied discipline and it refers to interdisciplinary academic field concerned with the meaning and nature of gender. It emerged as a part of women's studies which started in the 1960s and 1970s, and it includes sociology, anthropology, literature, philosophy, women's studies. Now what does gender studies do? It tries to examine gender inequality, women's lived experiences, sexuality, concept of masculinity, and interaction of gendered social processes with race, class, and other systems of inequality. So gender studies is basically a study which focuses on inequality in whatever it is not only related to gender. It is about race also. It is about class structure also. Now, what is gender? There are two words which we have to bear in mind. One is sex, another is gender. Sex is biological. Gender is a construct. Sex means male or female, man or woman, or boy or girl. Usually. Alright? One is either born as a boy or a girl. It is a biological phenomenon. Gender is a social construct. What do we mean by social construct? That it is created. What does that mean? That the idea of femininity and idea of masculinity is created. So a boy is expected to be, brave, active, aggressive, all these things. Whereas a woman is expected to be passive, docile, submissive. So who gave this idea that girls have to be passive and boys have to be active? Boys have to be adventurous and girls have to be very timid. It is a social construct. It is not there in nature. If you look at the world of nature, all other animals except human beings, they don't have gender. Only human beings have the idea of gender because it is created with the help of language. It is created because of cultural practices. It is created because of the belief systems. Alright? So, gender studies talks about sexual identity. It is about sexual identity. Now, what is sexual identity? How would a person like to identify himself as sexual identity? So, gender studies focus not only on males and females, but they talk about a person's sexual orientation. What is sexual orientation? That a person may be born biologically as a man, as a boy, as a male. But his sexual orientation is not that of a man or a male. He feels more like a woman. That is sexual orientation. It could be vice versa also. It could be a woman, a female who feels like a man. Alright? Now, the accepted notion is that a person born as a male will be attracted to a female and female will be attracted to a man. That is the general idea. Opposites attract, we say. Alright? Now, because majority people are heterogeneous. Heterogeneous means attraction between opposite sexes. Alright? So, heterosexual. Yeah, most of the people are heterosexual. Now, it was believed rather, that same-sex attraction is not acceptable. It is not normal. Gender studies tries to subvert it. It tries to question it. And it tries to throw light on LGBTQAE plus. Nowadays, the term is plus. So, it examines certain issues which are related to this LGBTQA plus community. They try to say that it is not shameful to have a different sexual orientation. Getting out of the closet, that is the phrase which became very popular a few years ago when some of the laws were changed in our country about this LGBTQ community. Alright. Another theory which is associated with gender studies is queer studies. Now, queer means strange. Nowadays, some people say I am gender neutral or gender fluid. Fluidity of gender, which means that at some time, at some point of time, a person feels like a man, and at certain times, the person feels like a woman. I'm not very sure whether I am a man or a woman. So it says I am gender fluid. And earlier, it was considered to be a shameful thing to talk about such things, but nowadays there is more acceptance because we are talking about inclusive cultures, inclusivity. Alright. Nowadays, recently, just a few months ago, in Times of India, a series of articles were published about inclusivity, gender inclusivity. And there are many companies who nowadays specifically reserve certain seats for LGBTQ individuals. And they train their staff, other employees, how to deal with such people. How to include, because when we negate an individual saying that the person is a lesbian or a gay, we are negating the identity of that individual. That does not make a person bad. A heterosexual person is good and a lesbian or a gay is bad. How ridiculous. How unfair it is. A person's ability is to be taken into consideration when it comes to work. Intellectual abilities or knowledge or other skills have to be taken into consideration, not the sexual orientation of that person. Right? So, creating that kind of respect for all sections of society is the need of the hour. Still, we need more awareness about these issues. We need more sensitivity about these issues. It is not a matter to be laughed at. Mahesh Dattani, an Indian writer, Indian dramatist, he has talked about these invisible issues. 7 Steps Around Fire, one of his plays. It has a portrayal of hijras, the transgenders. So we need to see all sections of society. Just because majority believes in certain things, it means the best. Is it so? That is something which we need to ask. Alright? So it challenges these socially established norms and humanistic categories with a special focus on challenging sexual aspects like homosexual or heterosexual, again binaries, homosexual, heterosexual, gender-related questions like male and female, class-related issues like rich and poor, racial issues like white and black. So gender studies is not only about men and women or people with a different sexual orientation, it is about class, race, the color of the skin, everything is included under gender studies. These are some of the references on which this presentation is based. Are there any questions?
Yes, now we invite the questions.
જે meaning થાય છે એ બીજી મિનિટે એ ઇરેઝ થઈ જાય. So words are constantly under erasure. Erasure મતલબ કે એને ભૂસી કાઢવું, એને રિમૂવ કરી દે. એટલે એ લખે છે પણ કેવી રીતે ખબર છે? અમુક ડિકન્સ્ટ્રક્ટિવ ટેક્સ્ટ જે હોય કેવી રીતે લખાય? વર્ડ લખેલો હોય અને પછી એના ઉપર ક્રોસ કરવું. કે આ વર્ડ મેં લખ્યો છે, એ લખ્યો ત્યારે મારો અર્થ આવો હતો, પણ હવે હું એને ક્રોસ કરી નાખું છું કે ઓકે હવે એનો અર્થ એ રહ્યો નથી. That is what it means. So a deconstructive જે છે એ થોડું આવું confusion definitely create કરે છે. It destabilizes everything, right? But that is the purpose. કે બધું destabilize કરવું. That is the purpose.
Any other questions?
Okay. So if there is no
You have the wording. You have the wording.
no, okay. So we invite feedback from the students, just like yesterday. One or two feedbacks. So come for the feedback.
We are
Good. Anyone after this? You just Gujarati and Hindi, any language.
Because of their સિલેબસમાં લિટરરી ક્રિટિસિઝમ અને લિટરરી થિયરી આવી તો અમને પહેલેથી હાર લાગતું જ હતું. પૂજામાં મેં ઇઝી તો કર્યું હતું, પણ જ્યારે એસેના ફોર્મ આવ્યું ત્યારે નિતેશ સરે અમને કીધું કે ટેન્શન ના લેતા, એસે તો થઈ જશે. પણ થોડો માર્ક્સની રીતે ડાઉટ તો હતો કે ક્લિયર થઈ જશે ને, પણ અત્યારે તમે જ્યારે લીધો ત્યારે તો અમને મજાકા વેમાં અમને ભણાવવાના બેસ્ટ તો એક્ઝામ્પલ્સ જે અમને દીધા અને સાથે સાથે અમને જે નોર્મલ લેંગ્વેજ સમજમાં આવે એ રીતના તમે જે સમજાવ્યું એના માટે થેન્ક યુ સો મચ. અને અમે હંમેશા ગ્રેટફુલ રહીશું, હંમેશા એટલા માટે કારણ કે તમે બી કીધું અને આ મેડમે કીધું કે આ ખાલી સિલેબસના પાર્ટમાં કે ખાલી એક્ઝામ માટે નથી, આ લાઈફ માટે છે, એટલા માટે થેન્ક યુ સો મચ.
Anyone else? Go ahead. आजा 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 जो भी तेरे को लगे आजा फटाफट क्विकली. कल तो बोली थी अच्छे से. हाँ फिर भी यू हैव बीन एक्टिव सो गो अहेड. आराम से.
Whatever ma'am taught us today, it was just beautifully presented. Each and every one of us doubts or points and each and every topic were clear, were covered. I was very confused about this essay part because I only knew reconstruction. I only knew about that, and other part I was completely. I didn't have any idea. I'm so grateful to you, so thankful to you. You taught all of us and you taught me. I always remember it. Now whenever I speak or was talking in my handwriting teacher, I remember you. I'm already taught you.
Add to it that you don't remember me, but you remember the principles and how you can apply these concepts, these principles, not only in the appreciation of literary text for your further studies, but how you can apply it in your real life also. By always asking questions. This is for all of us here also. That always don't accept everything that is given to us. Always question. But that does not mean that you go on always asking questions and creating trouble not only for yourself and for others also. That is not what I mean. Again, problematic with language. This is the best example. Language does not give you exact meaning. But anyway, so go on asking questions. આ કેમ છે? આની શું જરૂર છે? આને કઈ રીતે રિપ્લેસ કરી શકાય છે? આમાં શું એડ કરી શકાય છે? ઇફ ચેન્જ ના કરી શકાય તો કઈ વાંધો નહીં. બધું કંઈ આપણે ક્રાંતિઓ કરી દેવાની જરૂર નથી.
સ્ટેટમેન્ટ તો લેવા માંગુ છું. I think also like to know
Otherwise, if you dabble in all kinds of theories, knowing about the theories is perfectly alright, because we have to know in order to find out what suits me, what suits my temperament, when I have to analyze a particular one, and what are the tools which are available to me to apply some of these theoretical principles. But then one needs to make a selection. Finally, one has to choose. કે કઈ થિયરી મારી લેવી છે અને કઈ રીતે મારે એને અપ્લાય કરવું છે. નહીંતર તો પછી એ કન્ફ્યુઝડ સ્ટેટમાં જ રહ્યા કરે.
Feedback.